Hey everyone, Kathy the Vegan Prepper here, and I have a fun project to share with you today. Recently, VEGEGA reached out to us and asked if we would like to take one of their metal raised garden beds to sort of test it out and see what we think, and we accepted the offer. I've been curious about metal raised garden beds for a while, especially recently, since some of the wooden beds that my husband has built for us have begun kind of breaking down and falling apart. They did last for a few years, but metal beds will last for at least 20 years, and we don't have to worry about water damage so much. They're rust resistant for a really long time, and you definitely don't have to worry about termite damage, which is kind of the main thing that has gotten most of our raised beds, is they've gotten some termite damage in them. And so yeah, when we got the offer, it's like I was ready, like let's go ahead and give it a go. Over the years, we have also seen that the water will kind of leak out of the side of the wooden beds, and so we also know that the porous nature of the wood lends itself to kind of evaporating more water than something like a solid side wood, like a metal bed. That was one of the main reasons that I was originally curious about trying out the metal raised garden beds, was to see if we could potentially retain more water in our garden beds. I will admit my main hang up has been worry about the side of the metal garden bed getting too hot in our extremely hot summers. We do live in Phoenix, so we experience some pretty extreme heat. But VEGEGA says on their website that the metal garden beds have really good heat dissipation, and so hopefully that ends up being true. I'm not going to, of course, be able to speak to the veracity of that statement until we go through summer here, but that is definitely something that I'm excited about, thinking about the possibilities there, mainly with the water retention, and then hopefully it helps us to create an even more sustainable and awesome desert garden in our backyard. The ordering process was really easy. We got our box very quickly. I was actually really surprised at the box that showed up. I thought it was way too small for how big the bed was supposed to be, but all the pieces were in there. It all just fit perfectly into the box. Every single panel and piece that we needed to build this giant garden bed that we ended up with was there. Adam was also pretty happy with the fact that there was extra hardware. So ultimately, when we finished the construction project, there were some extra screws and nuts and washers left over. And so that's kind of nice to know going into it, that, you know, if you lose a screw in the dirt somewhere, you don't necessarily have to be worried about it. And so, yeah, that ended up being a bit of a plus for us. Assembly ended up being pretty fun. Actually, it was easy, and it was kind of almost like grown-up Legos. Putting all the pieces together was a little bit fun, trying to figure out where they go in order to assemble this kind of big thing. It was fun. And so basically the only thing that you really need is a Phillips head screwdriver from your own tool stash. Otherwise, you get what you need. They send a little wrench that fits the nuts for when you're tightening everything down. Adam did ultimately end up grabbing his own cordless drill with a 10mm socket, FYI, if you are in possession of some tools, and that did end up making it go a bit faster, but it's definitely not necessary. Even our daughter was getting into assembly, and she was really enjoying herself, and she was doing all the tightening with the little wrench that they included, and yeah, she had a great time doing that. So it was easy enough for a 6-year-old to figure out how to put the screw through with the washer and then the nut. But I will definitely admit that the parts where the 6-year-old was doing it kind of took forever. We decided to do a lot of our initial assembly indoors, mainly because of a lot of the extreme heat that we've been facing in our area. Again, I do live in Phoenix, and it is September at the time of filming this video, but just last week we hit 114 degrees. So it feels like our September has officially forgotten how to September this year, and we are a little bit over it. But regardless, it ended up being a great decision. The assembled pieces, like what pieces got put together, they were really light and easy to move. I actually kind of recommend, even if you don't have weather that's actively trying to kill you, that you should probably, or you could probably start your assembly indoors. It's just a little bit more pleasant. All of the pieces were clean. There was no, like smudges coming off of any of the pieces from machining or anything like that. And so, yeah, I think that was a really great idea on our part to start inside. And it worked out really well for us. So what assembly we had to do outside, we ended up trying to do as quickly as possible. But honestly, if you had a bed that was smaller than the one that we got, you probably could finish all of your assembly inside and then just carry it out there, carry it out to wherever you would want to put it. And if we get certain smaller beds in the future, that's definitely what I'm going to do. But it would kind of depend upon your setup. There is a spot in my yard, it's in between a couple of grapevines, where I was looking at the VEGEGA website at a lot of their bed options, and because they have so many options, so many sizes, so many shapes, it feels like you could find something that would fit almost anywhere that you want something to fit. You can find it on the website. There is a link down below. Obviously, there's a link down below because we're doing a video where we got sent a product, so we're not going to try to pretend that there's not a link. But there's a discount code attached to that link. You can go check it out and see if there's anything that appeals to you. But for me personally, I have been wanting to plant passion fruit vines because that's another plant that does really well here and can grow kind of permanently. And I was wanting to plant a couple of them right in between my grapevines. And so I think I want to get myself at least one, if not two, of their very small, just circle beds that I'll put in between my grapevines, and then probably utilize something like a grow bag or something similar to that to put into the bottom of it so that we can fill it up with soil and not have to deal with all the Bermuda grass that's around that area. It's just a real problem in our yard is Bermuda grass, which is one of the main reasons we're just basically all raised beds with weed barrier. Then I can train those passion fruit vines up the sides of where my grapevines are. And I really think that that would be a great solution for me. And I'm really excited about this because potentially, you know, if you had to shift or move something, a grow bag would still be heavy, but it's a little easier to deal with something that's more flexible, especially considering that we could just unbolt the bed from around where we planted the vine, the VEGEGA bed, and like move it and kind of get to it. So I feel like the fact that they're kind of modular and the fact that you can kind of disassemble and assemble, I feel like is another huge plus with these, considering too that we might move in the future. We don't have solid plans now, but there's definitely some kind of potentiality there that we might move. And so being able to disassemble the bed or beds that we have at that time and put them down to like their parts, kind of like disassembling a little Lego set, right? And then it'd be much easier to move than a lot of these wooden ones that Adam has built, even when, you know, before they kind of started falling apart. So there's a lot of advantages, I think, in the fact that they are disassemblable and modular and all of that. Like there's just a lot. My brain is working, still trying to figure out all of the ideas, and I'm planning out kind of what we're going to end up getting next. But yes, the outdoor assembly we tried to do as quickly as possible. I was holding an umbrella over Adam the whole time he was working. I was just filming and I'm just standing there holding the umbrella. It was so hot that actually my calves on the back got burned through my jeans from standing there and holding the umbrella for him. And it's been a lot. It's been really difficult these last couple of weeks here. And just kind of unexpectedly so. I mean, obviously we are used to extreme heat in Phoenix, but it's been a little bit more than normal this year. And so basically, he completed that assembly. He's been a star this whole time. He finished out clearing this one area of our yard. It took him several days before work to prepare the soil and get it ready for the bed to sit. But once we got it all assembled, he looked at it and he said, you know, I think we should move it to the rocks in order to sort of utilize that space better. So he didn't necessarily need to do all of the clearing that he did, but it was his idea and I agreed with him. I think it's a great way to test if we can utilize that space in our yard. We have this ring of rocks around our yard, like many people do in the Phoenix area. And so we're going to try to utilize that space better. Sorry, I'm looking out my window at the bed. It's just so good looking. That's the other thing. Like, I'm very happy with the way that it looks. I just like it a lot. And so yes, we moved it to the rocks. And then when it came time to start filling it, we started filling it with some stuff around our yard. We filled the bed first with a lot of smaller pieces of wood that we had lying around from trees that have died. And then we took in a huge container of compost, like unfinished, kind of unaged compost that we had, like it was still not really quite broken down, but we still just used the entire thing. We dumped it into the base of the bed. And then we also went and trimmed a whole bunch of vines. There's a whole bunch of Armenian cucumber plants I have right now in my garden that are just going absolutely insane. And so we just trimmed back a ton of the vines and started using some of the vines in there as well. And so ultimately, though, to fill it completely, we ended up buying 23 bags of soil. Because again, this particular bed is quite large. Not all of the beds are this big from VEGEGA. But we ended up buying 23 bags of soil in a couple of trips that we had to take. We underestimated our soil need at first, and so we ended up having to go back for more. But we also mixed worm castings and some azomite rock dust minerals into the soil, and that tends to be how we mix our soil all of the time. We always just add a bunch of worm castings, as many as we can afford at the time, and then the azomite rock minerals to sort of enrich the soil. And then over time, I typically use worm castings as my primary fertilizer, just over time to sort of build. I just sort of dig through my wood chips around the base of the plant and dig a little bit of worm castings into the soil and then put the wood chips back on top of where the worm castings were. And that seems to keep my plants happy and thriving. Obviously, wood chips are not the solution for every area, but in the Phoenix area, I feel like it's virtually required to have wood chips because they protect the soil and the soil organisms from the sun. The beating sun can actually kill your soil. And so we go ahead and put the wood chips down. And then also, obviously, it helps with water retention. We do not deal really with powdery mildew here. I'm not going to say it can't ever happen, but it's just not something that really happens in a super hot, dry environment like we have. And then we also don't really deal with slugs. I know that there's certain areas where if slugs are a real issue for you, putting wood chips down is not the wisest thing to do in your garden beds. And so definitely tailor your garden advice for your area and don't necessarily put wood chips down just because we do. Because of some of that extreme weather that I keep talking about, I have decided to plant only seeds in this bed for now, just because I don't know when these temperatures are going to stop spiking and then going back down. Seeds obviously they have germination. They don't have an intelligence, but it's like they know when to come up, They are programmed just sort of in their genetic code to only sprout when conditions are correct. And so I find, especially in some of these changing where you kind of like, I don't know if it's quite time to plant yet. You have more success planting seeds than you do having the full plants. At least that's my experience. Granted, I also have a very long growing season. I'm not worried so much about frost. October is actually really when our really big season of planting starts. So I have a little bit more time so I can plant seeds and not necessarily have to start seeds early. Especially again too, because of our conditions, I don't like starting seeds indoors and then putting the plants outside because you have to do this hardening off process, which doesn't ever seem to work quite as well. I feel like my little plants need to be used to the weather conditions from the time that they were born. So we can't just like start them inside and then be like, surprise, you have to live in this. That they don't ever seem to work out very well. So I like to do kind of two methods for planting my seeds, and I'll share that briefly here. I'm showing you two herbs I'm planting. One is white sage, one is calendula. So with white sage, it has a kind of famously low germination rate. Hopefully these guys will germinate, but I like to just sort of spread the soil or spread the wood chips away, put the seeds onto the soil and kind of tamp them in just with my hand and pat them in. And then I put the wood chips back, and then hopefully as they germinate, what I can do is then move the seedlings to plant them exactly where I want them to go. I typically go in with just like a little fork. It's literally a dinner fork, and I get into the roots and I pull the plants up, and then they get moved kind of once they have their true leaves, but not when they get much bigger than that. Honestly, I have found the smaller they are when I move them, the more success I seem to have. Although I do wait for at least a couple of true leaves to show up before I move them. And then also there are plants like calendula, which form a tap root when they sprout. And so those kinds of plants are much more difficult to move successfully because the root goes so deep and so fast, and then you end up potentially breaking or disturbing that tap root when you move it, and so it's very difficult to move. So I tend to plant calendula exactly where I want it to be when it grows. And the same process there, I just sort of move the wood chips back, I put the calendula seeds in, sort of tamp them in, and put the wood chips back on top. But with those, I have to kind of plan out and put the seeds where I want them to be ultimately. And so I decided to put them at the very front of both of the curves of the bed, and then along that front like the front flat part also of the bed. So eventually, hopefully, I will get calendula bushes along the entire front of the bed, and it will be really beautiful. And then my plan with the white sage is to plant it out theoretically along the back, because when they get going, they can get rather large. And then I have other various medicinal plants kind of all the way through there. And so, yeah, that's kind of my plan for the bed, and I am really excited, and I think that it's working out really well. It is too early to say, honestly, how I 100% feel about the bed, because I don't know yet. I don't know how. I am assuming it's going to have really good water retention, and then hopefully the heat doesn't bother it once we start getting extra hot during our summer months, like in several months. But so far, I will say I love the look of the thing. I keep, like, it's right there outside my window, and I keep looking at it as I'm filming, and I'm like, gosh, it's just like so pretty. I just love the way that it looks. I love the white, like they have colors. So VEGEGA has like 4 colors, I believe, that you can get for your beds. And I like the way that it looks so much more than the bare stainless steel beds that are out there, like with other brands. And so I really do just love the way that it looks. And I mean, I'm assuming it's going to go well. I hope it does. And I can just sort of see us having several beds along our rocks, kind of surrounding the yard. But we'll sort of see how it goes. And that's everything that I have on the VEGEGA bed so far. And yeah, definitely check out the link down below. Go look and see if you're interested. And I don't know, let me know what you think. As always, I hope the rest of your day is good and your life stays wonderful. Thanks for watching. Bye.